Counting down in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Mr. Ronnie Cairnduff.
Well, good afternoon, Cameron.
Welcome to the CamTalks show.
Well, it's an experience, I've got to say.
Father dearest, welcome to the warehouse.
Indeed.
How do you feel knowing that your son is living with over 300 people in a warehouse complex in North London?
Just so pleased it's not me. But it's, I can see the attraction of it, and I understand that.
Well, thank you for coming. This is the first time you've seen where I live in London,
Indeed,
so
yeah.
I'm very wary of the fact that you might be a bit shocked. There's obviously a lot to look at. Is it anything like what you grew up like?
I had a lot more space than this, Cameron. A lot more space.
You did?
Yeah, well, you remember my studio. It was a lot bigger than this.
Well, this is my studio.
Well,
now,
I know,
Dad.
I can see that, but it's a bit like a sardine can,
Yeah, but I remember you telling me the stories of just put a little wall up here.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And do this.
Yes,
so I hope you're proud of it. Well, look, thank you very much for joining me. This is a very special episode of CamTalks because you're my dad.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, absolutely.
And thank you for coming on. And I think we've got so much to talk about.
Right, let's get on with it.
But generally, the very first thing I want to know about is: have you ever heard of podcasts?
I have, yes. I don't quite understand them all, but I understand that it's certainly big part of the social media.
Interesting. Is there any podcasts that you listen to daily or ever?
Yours.
I love that, Dad. You're my number one fan. Thank you very much. But it's not unlike, the radio shows and the type of stuff that you used to do, right?
No, I don't think we actually did any of this sort of stuff. I did a lot of background filming, corporate drama. We did quite a bit of, but not podcasts like this. We had no facility to get this out into the media like you guys have today. It just didn't exist in my day.
That's it. You could record all you wanted, but it'll just be a bunch of tape sat in the corner of your office.
Right across racks and racks of big 1-inch tape.
So. I absolutely love it. So look, obviously, I'm a filmmaker / video producer / marketing person. All sorts of names you could attribute to my job. What is it that you did? Give us your quick story for those people that don't know who my dad is.
Well, I left Ireland at the age of 20 on my way to Australia to seek my fortune. Unfortunately, that didn't quite happen. And I left with a friend of mine with a guitar to sing our way to Australia. And it was going to take 6 months to get there. And we had all the various visas and injections up the bottom and all that sort of stuff. And it was going to be exactly 6 months to get down to Australia. And so we left fond farewell from Belfast. And the only gig we had was in Glasgow. And so we played the gig in Glasgow and didn't get very much money for it. And somebody said, "Have you ever played in Auchtermuchty?" And we went, "No, we're off to Auchtermuchty." And then somebody would say, "Have you ever played in Dundee?" "No, we're off to Dundee then." And then before we knew it, it was 1 year later and we have arrived in London. So the 6 months is way out the door. And by that time, we haven't got very much money, but we've had an absolute ball performing all over the UK in various clubs, folk clubs, working man's clubs, theatres, anything just to get recognised. And the interesting thing was we had an old automobile van that we made into a little house, as it were, with a double bed and a little cooker and all of that sort of stuff. Now, the interesting thing is, during all of that time, I doubt we slept in that more than 7 nights. Because wherever we appeared, people would say, "Oh, where are you staying?" And we said, "Well, we've got a van outside." "Oh, good Lord, no. Come and stay with us." And we stayed with some of the most wonderful people up and down the country. And, of course, next morning, a big breakfast, and away we would go in our little van to the next gig.
Incredible. And so when did you actually hit the rock? The rock we know as Alderney.
As Alderney. Well, many years go by, and, in fact, my first marriage was sort of prior to all of that. And during my first marriage, I was queuing up to buy a house. And this is many years ago, and in fact it was 1971. And in those days, and this was in northwest London, you could buy a house in London for like $6,000.
Whoa.
Yeah, I mean, that was
Jesus.
like a 3-bedroom house. You could buy them. Trouble was that you'd go in and you'd put an offer in of, say, the $6,000, and somebody would come along and gazump you. That was the big word in those days. And it wouldn't gazump you by like 1,000 quid. It'd be like 100 quid. And that made all the difference. You just go, I can't afford that. So we were forever being gazumped. And so it ended up that there was a new development being built on the old Hendon RAF aerodrome, which had all been cleared. And there's a new development going in there. And so this was February, and the development wasn't going to be ready until the September. So at the February, I'm on my way home, and I pop into the estate agent on a Saturday night, and I say to the estate agent, we're very keen to buy one of these houses. What is the cheapest one? And he said £10,000.
Wow.
And I nearly fell off my chair. Well, in fact,
In a good way?
In a good way. Well, no. Where we were going to get 10 grand from, no idea. Absolutely no idea. But you thought, oh, what the hell, we'll do it. Yes.
How much is that today? Like 50, 100 grand? I don't know. Inflation goes up, right?
A lot more. Let's just say it's a lot more. A lot more. Anyway, so it ended up, I said to this guy, this is a Saturday night, and he's opening up on first thing Monday morning, first come, first served, and it's going to be on a big plan on his desk. And I said, what time do you open? He said, 9 o'clock. Oh, well, I'll be here about 8:45. And he says, I think you better make it a bit earlier than that. And I said, why's that? He said, because that lady over there, and I looked around, I hadn't noticed this lady, sitting in the porch of this estate agent in a deck chair. And she turned out to be a lady whose husband then became our great friends, whose mother lived in Alderney. So by the time I got back to my flat and got a few bits and pieces together, we get back to find there's another couple there, then us. And it ended up, we slept on the street on the Saturday night and the Sunday night. All the national press were there. It was unbelievable. We had to get the police in because on the Monday morning, there were only going to be 50 houses up for sale, and 250 people had been camping out in the street.
Wow.
For 2 nights in the freezing cold in February.
Wow.
And that's what we did. So during the process of sleeping on the pavement, this chap, Don Williamson, and his lovely wife, Sally, what do you do? All the usual stuff. And he said, my mum lives in Alderney. Now, I'd spent a great deal of time on the Isle of Arran in Scotland. So the moment I heard about this little island, I thought, ooh, that sounds right up my street. And indeed, the very following year, 1972, we did in fact go to Alderney. And I remember we stayed, this was with my first wife, Pat, we stayed in the Grand Hotel, and we didn't know it was Alderney week. It happened to be in August. And on the Monday morning, we're having breakfast in the Grand Hotel, and Ray Parkin comes over to our table and said, today is our cavalcade day. Would you good people like to be our judges? And we said, well, yeah, of course we will, And as they say, the rest is history.
Wow, incredible! I didn't actually know that's how you first heard about Alderney, because obviously most of me and my friends, Alderney's just always been part of our lives, but you actually had to find it.
Well, yes, absolutely, and of course the moment you find it, you fall in love with the place. I certainly did, and that was that. I thought, oof, yeah, I love this place. Like I said, it was very like the Isle of Arran in Scotland, and that's where we spent a lot of times during my scouting days, and we'd be over there twice a year for 15 years.
So you like the outdoors?
Yes.
You like a close pub/restaurant. You like like good scenes. You like the beach.
Yes.
You like the golfing. How many years ago was it that you realised that Alderney was going to be the place you were going to retire to? When was it in my life that you decided that actually we're going to stay here and you kids can stay there?
That was way before you were born.
Really? Wow! Yes, it was a done deal.
It was a done deal, certainly from my perspective. And when your mum arrived, it was a fantastic situation because it was love me, love Alderney, And if your mum, dear Leslie, had said, no, I don't like Alderney, I'd have had to say, well, fond farewell and have a wonderful life.
You're just going to sack mum in?
Yes.
What?
So that's the way it works. And you know how Alderney works.
Of course,
Alderney it's like the Marmite thing, isn't it? But thankfully, Leslie fell in love with it. And that was that. And we actually got married in our little cottage, which we bought way before we got married. And we still have that little cottage until today. So,
Incredible. I mean, I don't think many people ever consider their life sort of purpose to find a place like Alderney. But now that I've grown up, with Oldham in my life, it feels obvious that one of the things you want to do in life is to find where you want to settle. And I don't know whether or not I will live in Oldham.
Well, not at this age. Of course you wouldn't. I mean, you've got the world as your oyster at the moment. But as you get older, and the bottom line is, on the basis that you don't get run over by a trolley bus, you will live to a grand old age. And I happen to be 73 at the moment. And, if I said to you, can you imagine yourself at 73? You'd go, no, of course I can't. Well, in time, on the basis that you will grow old, and then life changes and your decision-making changes about where you're going to go. You might go all around the world and travel and all the rest of it and do all that and get it out of your system and maybe come back and settle here. But you could just settle in Canada, Australia, America, wherever. So it's where you feel comfortable with. And when I found Alderney, that was what I felt. And although I worked in London in production and so on, it was always in the back of my mind that Alderney was, that's where your heart is. And so you spend all the time in Alderney, any downtime you have. I mean, we didn't go to Spain and Mallorca and all that nonsense. We just went to Alderney.
No, I remember the one holiday we did go to was Tenerife.
Oh, well, that was a dreadful.
It was a dreadful place,
yes,
wasn't it?
Unfortunately, I didn't have a big enough gut then, and certainly not enough tattoos. And the Kiss Me Quick Hat Brigade were all there, so I hated that.
It sounds like you're a planner. But I have to say, as you look back at your life, I don't know how much most of it was planned. So do you believe in heavy planning and sticking to something?
In the early days, you see, when you make these decisions, like I say, I left Northern Ireland when I was 20. So, of course, there's no proper planning and decision-making there. Away you go and let's see what happens. But as you get older and you settle down and you get married, and I was always one for, goal setting. So what are you trying to achieve? And I remember your mum and I would always have a written goal that would be on the fridge. And the reason it's there is because you're seeing it every day, and that gives you a purpose. Now, that's not to say you're going to get to the goal, but the goal is there. And when you do achieve that, by Jove, the satisfaction you get when you've actually achieved that. And your mum and I had this thing that we're going to buy a house in Alderney, and that would be on the fridge. Our goal would be, at some stage, we'll buy a house. And 2 years later, we had the house.
Jesus, Dad, you should write a book. The amount of people that ponder how to set goals and blah. The secret, folks, is to stick it on your fridge.
Yes, exactly.
Jesus.
Yeah, simple.
That's amazing. That really is amazing because we now live in a generation where everyone's like hyper aware and everyone wants to be personally developed, and they want to stick on your fridge.
Exactly.
It's a shame actually. I had a bloody big mirror up here earlier on before
it just collapsed.
It just collapsed earlier. But that has some of mine and Nina's goals written on the mirror. So it is visualizing and being able to just see it every day is really important. And so tell me, I listen to a lot of books. Every single week I'm listening to books, and I'm very lucky to feel that I can just soak up the knowledge from other people. Where did you learn all of your kind of skills from?
Just from experience. I was never terribly academic. I left school when I was 15, and I was in full-time work before I was 16.
Wow.
In full-time work. And I worked for a while in the north of Ireland, and I became a window dresser in a big department store, and that was great fun, and that was probably where I got all the artistic bit from. But it was that and music were the key things to me. And the music just went on for years and years and years. And for those people that still listen, I'm still happy to do it.
Absolutely. And of course, you used to play a lot in London, right?
Oh, yes.
So tell me, what was the scene like in London back then?
Well, in the very early days, I ended up running two of the most successful folk clubs in London. And we're now back in the very late 60s and early 70s.
Wow.
And in those days, I can tell you, there was something like 80 plus clubs in London alone. Folk scene was huge. And clubs were all over the country. And this is where I met lots of the great old guys who became my great mates, like Jasper Carrott and Mike Harding, Billy Connolly, all of these guys. And we didn't have tuppence to rub together, but it was absolutely a great time where all these folk singers got together. And to this day, we're still friends. My old mate, Richard Digence, he's been to Alderney a few times. and I brought many other people over. So it becomes like a family thing, and you just know all the mates and, all the songs and all that sort of stuff.
So where's the folk gone, Dad?
Well, unfortunately, like all things, time changes everything, and the music scene changes forever. It's a bit like saying way back then, well, where's the punk rock? Well, it wasn't there because it wasn't there. But, and the folk music was, and then it all moved, and the whole folk scene died down, and so did the clubs. But I must tell you an interesting little scenario. We had a great Irish guy called Noel Murphy, and he was the equivalent to Max Boyce in Wales. He was the equivalent of that in Ireland. Huge, great guy, big ginger beard, great mate of mine, and he had a big Irish Southern accent. Oh Jesus, all this sort of stuff, And he put a folk band together, and the folk band was called Draft Porridge. Right? What a great name for a folk band, Draft Porridge. Anyway, so one night we're all playing there, and this folk club was in Bayswater, and it was called the Holy Ground Folk Club. No religious connotations. The Holy Ground is where they grow the pochine in Ireland, and that's where the name came from. Anyway, so they're up on the stage singing, and the next thing was, in comes this suit, and everybody looks and thinks, ooh. And of course, in those days, used to be scouts going around looking for talent and all the rest of it. And Noel Murphy had a banjo player who was the most astonishing banjo player you could ever see. And his name was Davy Johnson, right? And this scout looks at him and he goes, there is talent. And the next thing, he's whisked away and he leaves the folk band, and that's it. And to this day, he is still the lead guitarist for Elton John.
Old Elton.
Yep.
Bloody hell.
So the big tall guy with the blonde hair, Davy Johnson, that's the man that was in the folk club in the early 70s.
Wow, so it started all that time ago, back when scouts were literally having to go into the venues.
Well, they did. And many names got called. Well, that's, like some Billy Connolly and Jasper Carrott, all these guys all got those sort of opportunities. And of course, in those days, you see, there were plenty of places to perform. And I do remember Billy Connolly always saying that when he first started television, he hated it because television just gobbles up your material. So you do an hour on television, you think, crikey, where am I going to get another hour of material from? Whereas in the clubs, because the numbers are quite small, you can repeat that material over and over and over again.
Interesting. And of course, Billy's gone on to
he's
big movie actor.
He's become an absolute legend.
Yeah, absolutely.
Legend. And I'm so delighted that I knew him. He wouldn't know me from a shifting spanner. But in our days, we knew each other. And in fact, I've still got my folk club book, which says Billy Connolly and the fee, £15 or 75% of the door, whichever is the greater.
15 quid for a night.
15 quid, yeah.
I love it. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And of course, so I don't know whether it feels this way, but so music culture is now a lot more just, I mean, you must have seen Rocket Man, the new Elton John film.
Well, I haven't actually, but I've heard about it, yeah.
But seeing where musicians from came in those days, music wasn't accessible. It wasn't like you just put on a new tune. You had to kind of live and experience these different moments. Was there ever someone that you watched as a kid that was a guitarist or
No,
folk?
what was fantastic, certainly in all the folk days, was the range of talent was extraordinary. And the talent was out there. It was just amazing. And the thing that I find these days is when you look back now to some of the lyrics of the old songs, the 60s and 70s and so on.
Oh, Bob Dylan.
Yeah, I mean, they
Blowing in the Wind.
They live forever, you see. And I used to wonder about, crikey, how did somebody write that song? Where did all that come from? But I did a little bit of writing, and I did a few telly bits, but nothing.
Well, look, let's move on to that, and obviously because as my father, I figured that you could give us some really good insight into forget all the cameras, forget all the lights, forget all of the technical stuff, because as a storyteller, you've always put the performance first.
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit more about where your love for storytelling came from.
Well, it is about the performance, and you know, even if somebody's telling a joke, to me, it has to take the listener to get into his imagination to take this story forward, whatever the joke is or whatever the story is. And so the performance is everything. And I do remember many, many times that, particularly in the folk clubs, we would have open nights and lots of people would come and sing, and there'd be some guy or some girl, whatever, and they'd sit there and they would be fantastic on the guitar. And then 29 verses later, you're going, oh my God, when's this going to stop? You know, and what they would be doing, they would be playing to themselves, and a lot of it was their own music, and some of it was very good, but you weren't performing to the paying audience. They're the ones that have come to be entertained, not to see you sitting, maybe a duo, playing to each other. So it's the performance getting out there to the audience and dragging the audience into your imagination so that they can follow whatever you're trying to do in terms of a story.
I love it. And obviously this has kind of come in two parts, really. You know, you as a professional filmmaker, you're making adverts. I mean, were they even called adverts back then?
Oh, yes, commercials.
Yeah, I mean, like, tell me a little bit more about that, because I imagine that most of the equipment was like the size of a massive, like, sofa.
Huge, you know. And I mean, these days, your cameras and everything at the moment, you know, we'd still be setting up. You know, it would take us 2 or 3 hours just to set the damn thing up. You know. But it was a whole different ball game in those days. And I was lucky enough, I had a contract with United Artists, who were the biggest cable suppliers. Now, one of the extraordinary things that used to happen way back in those days, that these big companies like United Artists would go along and do a deal with the local authority. And they would say, "Oh, we want to dig up every road in your local authority, and we want to put a cable into every house." So the diggers would come right down the road, dig up the road, and dig up the pathway into somebody's house, and that was called cable television, and that was superseded by all the digital stuff. But that's how it was, and I was lucky enough to get a contract with United Artists to do all their commercial work. And we worked for them for years. We were churning out, 20 a week. Oh, wow. Non-stop.
And tell me, was the audition process for the talent, was it as simple as it is today? You know, just a couple of emails?
Just going back to this storytelling, when I first started with United Artists, all the stuff was very bland. It would have a still of an Indian restaurant. Please come to the Indian restaurant on whatever, you know. And I used to think, oh, and I had a bunch of people, great, talented actors and writers and all the rest of it, almost like what you've got here now. And we were very keen to get into the more dramatic and more creative side of an advert. And we would take a 30-second advert, for example, for a local garage. And we would have actors in there. And I remember one, and the garage was called Watson. And so we came up with this idea about Sherlock Holmes and Watson. And we had about 4 actors in this thing. And again, only 30 seconds. And all these guys, we loved all this stuff. And of course, United Artists went, wow, this is great. And the clients were over the moon because, you know, rather than just having a photograph and the name of your company across it, you know.
That's it.
They were getting something very special.
And of course, I've seen a lot of your early work, and I'm amazed to see some of the access that you've been able to achieve over the years to some of the biggest landmarks in London. I mean, I couldn't, go and walk up Big Ben today. I couldn't go and stand up on the roof of Piccadilly today. Tell me, how did you get the shot? The gentleman sat in Piccadilly Circus, the big billboards, the advertising that goes on. You placed an actor sitting on top of one of those billboards.
Yes, he sat at the top of the Haymarket, where was the biggest illuminated sign at the time.
What was he? Was he strapped in? Did he?
Oh yes, we had professional, stuntmen up there to look after him. And I remember the auditioning for that, where I said to the guy, because we did it all in mime, that particular one. And so I was looking for a mime artist, and one of the things was must not be scared of heights. You know? And as it happened, the guy that I used had done a little bit of trapeze work, and of course he loved the idea. And so what I had to do, the final shot was this mime artist sitting on the top of this huge big illuminated sign in Piccadilly, and I've got 5 cameras all around the place on different buildings and on the ground, and I got all the permission for it and all the rest of it. The only problem was that was the light, and the best light was about just after 5 o'clock in the evening. That was the best light. But of course, rush hour. And this guy had a white face with two big red, and he was doing all the mime bits. So he's sitting on top, doing all, pointing to the sign and all the rest of it. And of course, people would look up and they think, someone's going to jump, someone's going to jump. Well, the next thing was, and I'm in another building across the street, and I look down Haymarket, and all I can see is all these policemen running up the Haymarket. And the next thing, there's about 4 fire engines, ambulances, police cars all over the place. And by the time we come back down onto Piccadilly Circus, there's this very irate policeman with lots of badges and things. Who is in charge around here? And I said, I am, sir. And I showed him my permit. He just tore it up. He said, this is not worth anything. Oh, I'm so sorry. Wow. So I did wing it a bit. And often my little motto of better to ask for redemption than for permission.
I like that. And I believe I've taken that on board myself, actually, which, today I don't think I could get away with.
No, there's a lot of things. I mean, these days, you guys have got much more restrictions than we ever had. We could do all manner of things. And generally speaking, it wasn't a big issue. But you can understand now with the security being what it is,
Absolutely, for sure. Well, look, let's move on then. So obviously, so as a filmmaker, you went to Alderney and you kind of started performing. Tell me a little something about Alderney Week. Where did it all start?
Like I say, when Ray Parkin invited us on the very first occasion we were there, it led on from that. And then the following year, I did a little bit of theatre stuff and stage work, whatever. And it just grew and grew and grew. And it ended up that I was totally involved with Alderney Week with Ray. He'd already been doing it for about 10 or 12 years. And so Ray and I did nearly 15 years together. And in the end, he did 27. And in terms of what I've been involved with, I've done 38 years with Ray, involved one way or another, and then 10 years up running it completely, and I'm at the helm with a great team of people, Lee and Alona and so on.
Oh, I remember. I mean, I grew up around the crew, around the team.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be long after the first Alderney Week that you'd be preparing for the second one.
Well, yeah, and it was all about, it evolved. It was getting bigger and more professional and all the rest of it. And then Ray had brought over the Alderney Blowers. That became an essential part of Alderney Week, which today wouldn't be half the week it would be without the Blowers, and we love them very much, and everybody does. So and it was always a question of bringing in the team again, talent, and letting people perform, and the homegrown issue to me is very important. You see, if you look at some of the festivals today, they're absolutely brilliant, but why wouldn't they be? Because you're bringing in the best bands and all the rest of it. But what Alderney Week really has been, certainly when I was running it, was homegrown. The majority of it was homegrown. So it was, somebody who's the butcher one day, is now on the stage or whatever. So we would get we'd get the firemen in. The firemen were doing the full Monty and all this.
I remember that. Yeah.
And it was engaging all these people. And at first they would go, "Oh, good Lord, I don't want to do that. Oh, good, no, I don't want to do that." And then they'd get into it, and they just loved it. And there were other things where we'd have, the R&L boys dressed up as ballet dancers. I'm not getting into a tutu. And then after a while, oh, this is quite nice, in a way. And it was all about having fun, enjoying it, and performing. And everybody's a performer.
Absolutely. And this is the thing, right? So every Wednesday throughout Alderney Week was Gala Night.
Yep.
Explain what Gala Night is.
Well, Gala Night is a big variety show, and it has to have spectacle. So I would spend literally weeks making a prop that was going to be seen for maybe 30 seconds or a minute, whatever. And it had to be a spectacle. And when I think of what we did over the years, there were some amazing spectacles and spectaculars. I remember the turn of the century, the 2000 when all the computers were going to fold up and all that sort of stuff. And I came up with this idea of having this enormous banner with 2000 on it and the Alderney Lion and this thing was 60 foot wide and about 40 feet deep, and that rolled off the top of the Island Hall, and everybody went absolutely berserk,
Wow.
And things like, we've had the SAS in.
What?
Yes, we had a situation where it was the French Revolution, and there were 4 people who were taken from the island. All the local people like Jenny Rowley and I've forgotten it. There was a doctor involved. Anyway, the idea was they were going to be tried, and I'd made this huge big guillotine, and I was Napoleon, and I'm sort of doing the MC bit. And what about the charge for this person? And they'd have a defence. But the audience would all go, no, off with their head, off with their head, And I remember saying to Ray, but okay, they're all guilty now, and we've got this bloody big guillotine. We've got, well, we can't really. And I did the bit with the cabbage and all that. I said, well, we can't have people laying down, Who could rescue them? And we thought, maybe Doddy the lighthouse keeper. He could be the Scarlet Pimpernel. And there we are. No, that's not going to work. And Ray happened to say, well, I've got a contact in the SAS. And so he phones this guy in the SAS. And the next thing was they put together a complete exercise. And on the night before the show, right, over comes this big helicopter. And 4 John Smiths, they're all called John Smiths, SAS guys, come out, and they say to me, what do you want? And I took them up into the parapet of the Island Hall, and I said, I want you to abseil over the top of the parapet and come down this and slowly get onto the stage and rescue these 4 people. And they went, okay, and they kicked a bit of the parapet in the Island Hall, and a few bricks fell out, and they went, yeah, we'll get a peat on in here, don't worry, we'll be all right. And then they said, when's the show? And I said, well, it's actually tonight. And what time do you want us? I said, well, the show starts about 8, and I've worked it out that it's going to be about 10 to 9. And they all went, 21.
Synchronizing watches now.
And I'm going, that's 21 for 50. So it's at 10 to 9. And right on the dot, over they go. I hadn't seen them the rest of the day. I didn't see them at all. The show starts, we do all the bits, we do all the trials, they're all found guilty.
Wow.
Then over the top, over they come. And that was the sort of spectacle that we would do.
And then what happened to them?
Then off they went. Next morning, 6 o'clock, chug, 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 they've all gone.
Wow.
And a week or so later, letter from whoever, with the MOD or whatever, operation, whatever it was called, 100% successful. So they use it as a training exercise.
There you go. So, brilliant. I mean, Alderney is no stranger to strange things. Right?
No,
strange
absolutely.
things. People with high profiles. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff that kind of happens in this little island. I guess for me, it's an island that I've kind of grown up as is part of my life. Very different to you. I think that with yourself, it's like maybe your friends, the people that you know in Alderney, have kind of grown up with you.
Yeah.
Whereas I've seen all generations, starting with my parents' generation. So a lot of the things that I've learned growing up has come from seeing people like yourselves and Mum in Alderney in a very social situation. Am I right in saying that it's a little bit of a boozy island?
That depends on how social you want to get.
Well, this is a really good point because socialising in the 21st century, particularly in London right now, I mean, there's probably a lot of people listening to this who are sat in their room by themselves on their phone, scrolling away and flicking and flicking and flicking. And Alderney has this incredible, it's almost like a natural built-in time watch where you know where to go at what time.
And, there's a great deal of drinking done, obviously, but that's down to you. And many of my mates, and I'm one of them, we do either a 4-3 or a 5-2, where you don't drink for 2 or 3 days.
Oh no, look, I'm absolutely not hitting on the drinking. Actually, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to encourage it because actually, what I see the difference in our generations now is that our generation drink to get drunk. And when I see you guys in Alderney, it's you drink because you're socialising. Yeah. The act of socialising in Alderney is phenomenal.
It's the thread that joins the friendships together. And what is lovely about Alderney is that friendship is truly friendship. It's not like we're in London, it's acquaintances and all that sort of stuff. Now, the interesting thing I find as I get older, I think the pressures of younger generation, and I would advocate to many, many people, before you go out and charge around the world, and by all means do all of that if you want to, but there's a lifestyle in Alderney that is unique and hard to understand, but that lifestyle brings the biggest enjoyment that you could ever imagine. It is unique. What's it about? Sometimes you don't know. You go for a walk. You see the beauty of the island, and okay, we've got German fortifications and all the rest of it. But in terms of what you see as an island, that's your lot. And thankfully, just about everybody on the island thinks exactly the same. That doesn't mean to say you know everybody. So what the lovely thing is, all these people have got this love for this extraordinary little island. And no matter where you go in the world, you usually end up bumping into somebody who's been to Alderney or lives in Alderney or whatever. It's extraordinary.
It's amazing. It's the centre of the world, really. But look, we all love it so much, but there's problems, right?
Well, yes. I mean, currently we have huge transportation problems, and there's also problems is the wrong word. It's unique in that the government situation, unlike the UK, there's no party political situation there. It's 10 states members, effectively with 10
different ideologies, different backgrounds, policies, experiences.
And sometimes it's very difficult for the 10 people to agree. So we're going through a real tough time. But a lot of people in Alderney have seen these before. The good news is the island is seeing investment that we haven't seen for many, many years. And that is very encouraging. Now, we just have to get the transport situation sorted. And I'm convinced that will get sorted in its own time through demand and more people coming and all of that sort of stuff. And this is what I'm saying about people thinking about changing their lifestyle. You can, there's just a young couple have arrived in the last month or so, and he's running an IT business, and he says, brilliant, and he's got 2 young kids, and and he sees it instead of the big mad rush. I mean, I've just come today, landed in Southampton this morning, train up here, walk into Waterloo, you go, oh my goodness, what, and it's busy, buzzy bush, and you just go, which is great, I lived in London for 30 years, so I know what it's like. But like I say, as you get older, and I think maybe more youngsters these days are thinking about their longer because of their parents, because, your generation has had a lot more time with your parents than we ever did. And that's fantastic. That is brilliant. And this is what I'm saying. So you see what we're doing and learn from that. Whereas we were sort of left, we would never socialise with our parents. Good Lord, no.
Well, you've definitely been good role models.
Yeah. Well,
I learned how to get out of the Georgian at 8 years old after I was left there in the evening. But it's fine because I can stand on boxes and undor. And I remember knocking on the door and you answered and you just greeted me home at 4 a.m. in the morning. Now, I mean, Alderney has this incredible, it's got a vibe about it. It gives all the young people on the island the confidence to speak to old people. It gives the old people the confidence to live out whatever dream they want to do. And maybe this is the thing, is that there's this feeling in London and particularly with people in my sort of circles, is if you're not getting paid for the job, don't do it, or don't work hard at it. And I've got this really good kind of feeling that anything that kind of happens in Alderney is done for the community instead of the money or the
there is a huge community spirit in Alderney, and I think per capita it is one of the highest contributions to charities that you'd probably get in Europe, I would have thought. It is, from that point of view, it is absolutely unique.
And probably one of the healthiest places for your mind. I have to say that, you're good, you're looking good. You're looking very good,
Well, also the air in Alderney, as we know. I mean, you see at night time, you see stars that
Beautiful.
you'll never see in or in London. And I mean, even sitting on the tube today, no one's smoking, obviously, but it's still, and there's the smell of the tubes, trains, and you think, oh, it's just the pollution must be huge in London, huge. Whereas in Alderney, you just walk out every day.
That's it. That's
It's
it.
lovely.
And why do you call it Billionaires Golf then? What's the?
Well, because there's not many people play there, and we have the most wonderful scenes on the island.
It's an open course. It's an open course. I love it. And of course, so there's Alderney, there's Guernsey, there's Jersey, Sark and Herm. Have you been to the other islands?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And so to what's special then about Alderney that the other ones kind of don't have?
Space and the lack of it. I'll tell you a very interesting story about the bird watching in Alderney has really taken off big time. And I bumped into a bird watcher. I'm not particularly into birds, but I met this guy and he said, what is unique about Alderney in terms of the bird watchers is because the landmass is so small, it's big enough for birds to migrate to and from. And because it's so small, you see more birds than even you see in Guernsey or Jersey. Because there's parts of the island you can stand there and virtually look around the whole and see nothing but sea.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So yeah, that's a big plus.
And of course, so before we kind of leave the old sort of theme here, Mum is obviously she's worked all her life in the care industry as of you, but we'll talk about it in a second. But more recently, Mum was saying that the whole island is kind of becoming a dementia-free zone. Is this because of the ever-aging population? Or are you just setting yourselves up right now, and ignoring all the young people and say, yeah, we need the stairlift up Ray Road, please. I mean, it's an incredibly friendly island for older people.
I think there's a lot of awareness of mental illness these days, and certainly you guys are probably getting more of it than we ever did. It was sort of thing that was brushed under the carpet, but it has become a big, big thing. And Alderney, because of its aging population, has to face that head on. And I've got to tell you, the strides that have been made in Alderney, it'd be great if half of that was over here,
And why is that? Is that because you've got people on the island who are experts in it, or is it just people wanting to gain progress?
It's a combination of both. We've got, a lot of experience. Your mum, for example. And many, many volunteers are very, very keen to. And why wouldn't you want to help older people? Crikey, they've seen us through the last couple of world wars, and I don't want to get into that. Seems to be a very hot potato at the moment.
But it's interesting because the mentality of someone who lives in Alderney is so much more community focused than anyone here. I mean, I almost find it a little bit, because I was living in Manchester for 8 years. So Manchester's a lot more friendly. People kind of look out for each other. Whereas in London, it's, totally different ball game. And, I think that's probably one of the reasons why I love Alderney. But you before kind of moving to Alderney full time, your mum ran a care home.
Yep. For 20 years.
Tell me what it was like running an elderly person's care home.
Fantastic. Absolutely. And, people used to say to me, and I was in television production at the time, and people would say to me, you're mad, what are you going into this business for? And it was a combination. Obviously, you've got to earn a living, and you guys were important as part of our criteria of what do we want to stay in London. And we'd done 30-odd years in London, and we could see, that this is just not sitting comfortably with us. So it was a complete change of career. And obviously, because Leslie, with her background in nursing and, my business acumen, that's what put the team together. But I have to say, and again, back to this goal setting, when we bought the care home, it needed a lot of TLC. And again, our goal was, within 2 years, this is what we need to do. And that's exactly what we did, almost to the day. And from then on in, things got easier because you were then putting in, we were one of the first care homes to bring in formal training. And way back, this 20-odd years ago, ironically, we were screaming at the government for money then, and here we are 20-odd years later still screaming for money. And unfortunately, it's not a sexy issue. It's way down the pecking order, although it is beginning to sort of come home to roost, But it was a wonderful experience, and I'm sure you guys, you and Emily, you had a great experience with, we always used to say you've got 22 grannies and granddads.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah.
It was
So we
part
loved it.
of it was
We loved
part of the the experience of being in a it's the same community feeling.
Yes,
The
absolutely.
care home
Yeah.
was not a clinical place.
No, and it had to be family, and family oriented is what it's all about. Is this where we would put our mum and dad? And the answer would be yes, of course.
But of course, a lot of people have this perception that care homes are disgusting places. That I'd never put my parents in a care home because, of course, the movies and you get this idea. What was it? So you said obviously it was family focused. That really made a big impact. Knowing that I could walk and talk to any of these people,
Yes,
and I'm
absolutely.
a little boy, and they got little. That's amazing. Why can't you scale that? Why is that not happening everywhere?
I have to say, the majority of homes are good. And you could say exactly the same with restaurants, with hotels, with any service industry. I'll never go there again. That's rubbish, and they're totally, haven't got a clue what they're doing. Blah blah blah. I would say that the majority of care homes in the UK are well run. Yep, there are rogue ones. There's no question about that. But that's part of what happens in business. Some people are good at it, and some people are not good at it. Some people are in there for the money, and some people aren't. The majority of the care home owners are carers at heart. And in fact, part of the problem is because they're not business orientated. That's why they're struggling.
Interesting. And of course, that's the problem today is that you have to have a business model that allows you to sustain yourself. Yeah. So, I mean, what is the argument here? Because, should all care homes be kind of put under kind of the NHS or put under one kind of branch?
We have argued for years that it should be, they talk about the NHS, the care from cradle to grave, all this sort of stuff. But social care is not involved in that, and that's where it should be. That is where it should be. And the whole NHS needs a complete reform as to what the service is. I mean, you break your leg and you're in hospital to be fixed. You get a disease called Alzheimer's, and tough. Go into a care home, pay for it yourself, or get the local authority to pay for it. And you go, well, what's this all about? Because one day you haven't got Alzheimer's, and then the next day you do. Mm-hmm. If you had broken your leg, you would have had it seen to by the NHS. So, and it's not easy, and we understand that. I mean, I spent years with the politics within the Hampshire Care Association, and ironically, over 20 years, I sat with no less than 13 health ministers, all arguing the same thing year in, year out. And here they are, still doing exactly the same thing today.
So who's paying for this then? Who's paying for the mum and the dads or the granddads to go into these
It's a combination of local authority who can't pay enough. And again, that's what puts pressure on care homes, and private residents who their families have to pay.
And how much is it? How much per year does it cost to have your mother or father in a care home?
Anything from 25 to 60,000 quid a year, depending on what scale you want to go into.
Wow. Jesus.
I mean, there are some huge, big sort of what you might class as 5-star care homes that are charging 50, 60,000 quid a year.
Wow. And is there any kind of insurance that families can get to ensure that?
There are various insurance schemes which are tied up always with the equity of your house and all that sort of stuff.
Because I remember when we were younger, you would tell them, you were just warning me and Emily always about the boom in old people, saying that the population's going to quadruple in size in terms of the
ironically, one of the issues that we argued about way back, and this is certainly 15, maybe 20 years ago, we said that there is going to be a crisis starting in 2017. Ironically, funny enough, we're now in that crisis. And there was no magic about this because the demographics told you. And all the various associations up and down the country said, look, since 2017 comes, that's when the SH1 starts to hit the fan. And here we are now with the biggest social problem we've ever had. And it's going to take a very brave government with a very deep pockets to fix it.
And do you think it's because they know that the younger generation can't pay for it? Because there's something to say that the older generation have had a little bit more wealth stored away But now we're at the point where literally, these younger families are now having to burden the load.
The pressure of younger families, they've got enough on their plate, and I have to say, you see, when this dreadful disease, dementia and Alzheimer's creeps in, this is not something that the average family can deal with. I mean, as you know, in our care home, it was 24-hour care, but we had 30-odd staff to look after all these people, and it was a rotation, 3 times in 24 hours. So you can't expect a young family to take on mum or dad who's badly in dementia or Alzheimer's to take on 24 hours a day. It's impossible. And that needs to be addressed. And a lot of certainly the health ministers I dealt with and the politicians have got no idea how it works. No idea. I mean, it would be lovely if half of them would just spend a day in a care home just to see what goes on. Yeah.
It's a really tough. I mean, I think that more than anything, it's the times change and the challenges become different. And I think one of the biggest challenges that we maybe weren't prepared for was having to create a new society where we're not having free stuff here and stuff in it, and even more of a capitalist society where we have to kind of be able to look for insurance. We have to look. It's tough, right? It's tough. We're heading toward an American society for sure.
But there has been no innovation. And, over the years, many suggestions have been put forward about how this can all be paid for. And the governments just stick their head in the sand over this sort of thing.
Yeah, it will change.
It is achievable. It is achievable. And I would guess by the time you guys get to that sort of age, it will be a different playing field altogether.
Well, hopefully we'll have some sort of VR headset that we can just go where we want. So, all right, Dad, we'll get to the end of the show now. What I want to ask you now is a few questions about what you would have asked your dad if you were doing a podcast with your dad all those years ago. What is it? What sort of advice can you give?
See, and I would guess I'm not the exception by any means, but we never had this sort of rapport with our parents. That just didn't exist, It was very orderly in that you do this, I'll order you to do, and you do this, and you do that, and whatever. So, if I look back and think, how many real conversations I had with my dad? Probably none. So that's how it is.
Wow. All right. So a little bit of advice then, beyond the goal setting. I'm living in London, Dad. I just started a new company, CamTalks. I'm trying to make some money in this world. How do I focus on building that kind of wealth in this city?
I always look upon it as your time should always be IPA.
IPA, let me write that down.
IPA.
Income.
Producing.
Activity.
That allows you to live and it allows you to do the things that you want to do. But if it's not productive, right, and if it doesn't relate to income, then what you do is you spend a lot of time allowing your heart to get out there and do all the things. But the world is the world, and the world needs money to make it work at any level. So as long as you've got that, and the more IPA you have, then the more time you have to spend on the things that you really love.
Interesting.
Right? Because if you can't pay the rent, you can't pay the food, and all the rest of it, then, you're doomed.
I love it. And so, I guess, so lastly, how are you, Dad?
I'm absolutely fine. I'm going for my big MRI tomorrow, but yeah, absolutely fine.
Well, of course, the you MRIs from your prostate.
Yep, my little prostate man here. There he is.
So let's quickly talk about this. And so many years ago now, probably what?
13 years ago.
13 years ago, you were diagnosed with prostate cancer.
Yes.
And I remember it like it was yesterday, because I thought, that's it. Dad's gone, I'm the man of the house now. And over the years, I became so much more aware of prostate cancer. I made a documentary about it.
You did, yeah.
I ended up finding out that it's not it can be aggressive, but it can also be non-aggressive. And so the nuance of the word cancer just completely became all sort of colours. And
Yeah, I think what happens when you're diagnosed, the very word cancer just throws everybody into a turmoil and the fear and there's a lot of ignorance around it. Thankfully, in my case, I got it early, and that's what it's all about. And that's why I keep encouraging all these guys. No, I'm going to have a finger stuck up my bum. Oh, for God's sake, you know, it's just ridiculous. But it's all about how you face this problem, and if you allow your negativity to take you down, and many men do, right? And I'm not saying I'm right, but I had the complete reverse. I said, right, and I'll be honest, I didn't fall apart. I mean, Leslie and I didn't sit down and cry on each other's shoulders. I just thought, oh, bugger this, I'll have to find some solutions to this. And I became like a big sponge, and I learnt and learnt and learnt, and I did a huge amount of research. All the different treatments, all the different side effects, all that sort of
But
stuff.
you also went for quite an advanced treatment, or not even advanced, a new treatment.
It was fairly new. I was the 19th patient, I think.
Wow.
In
So you thought you'd just put yourself on the chopping block and...
not
Well,
quite.
all
not
right,
quite
Doc.
the chopping. Yeah, it's called HIFU, high intensity focused ultrasound. It's worked for me, and it's worked for many, many other people. And the good news about that is it has the least side effects. So, but it's one of those things. You know, what men have to remember is that most men will die with it and not from it. I think the sadness for me now is coming into, nearly 14 years now, and the number of people that died way back then, men died, is the same as today. So I would question where's all this money going to? You've told me about the research, but surely things should have happened in certainly 10, 15 years, and it hasn't. So tomorrow I'll be in a big MRI tank, for an hour and a half, whatever it has to be. And I'm thinking to myself, well, why hasn't that moved on,
Absolutely.
And I don't know, is it money? Is it scientists? I have no idea. But it's all about keeping positive, keeping going, and, keep trucking.
I love it. All right, Dad. Well, look, we're gonna end the episode there because we have a very busy day.
We do.
We're gonna go off and enjoy London together.
Yep.
And I'm sure we'll do another episode soon.
I'd love to, Gammy.
Amazing. Thanks for coming.
Cheers.